So the early birds get the best of everything, they usually say. And you are the early bird, so congratulations. How many of you have read the book? Anybody? Okay, you should read the book. They have it. They have read it. In fact, they think it's pretty good, so you should read it. When we were asked to get together and do this for you all, I went through the journey of putting a lot of questions together because I really think that the most important thing is for us to understand and figure out how these two gentlemen think and what's behind all this knowledge. So I'm asking them to keep their questions succinct. We have a bunch of questions. We're going to discuss topics around energy, networking, security, innovation, education, and sustainability. And I cannot wait for the answers. I hope you're tweeting. I hope you're recording it. I hope you're writing it down.
I hope you're awake.
To make sure you're awake, you may want to take a deep breath, get up, do 20 jumping jacks.
Clearly, these gentlemen need no introduction, and I'm honored to know them, to be their friends, and for them to be, I see them as mentors. Massoud and I talk about being brothers from another mother. I love Bob. We ride on his shoulders in so many things that we did in technology and at high tech. So here we go. Here you are. Give us 2 seconds of, you've been at ETS for a couple of days. You've seen what's going on. What's your take on the state of the industry from the lens of ETS before we get into the questions? Just your sense of what you've seen, what you've heard, interacted with some folks.
I haven't detected much change from last year. Mm-hmm. I don't know what that is. I think there's slow progress being made in the background, but mm-hmm. I haven't heard anything dramatically different. Now I work in the my only connection to energy these days is in the solar side, which is just plugging along. After the big jolt a couple of years ago, it's sort of growing and growing,
steadily.
Nothing dramatic.
Right.
So that would be my bottom line. I think maybe we're making the normal slow progress of a quiet exponential.
Right. Massoud?
This year's theme is managing the chaos. And I feel that there is a lot more energy. Every year has been fantastic. And every year the undercurrent theme is building a community, building partnerships, and focusing on issues that matter. So this year is the continuation of that same flow. Continuity, but with some change, almost like a yin and yang. Mm-hmm. There is more energy, there is more connection going on, more discussions, more time for networking. And I have found it very, very informative, and I'm honored to be here.
Great. All right, well, let's start with the meat and the bones, perhaps, so energy. So I talk to people, and I have phrased it in the prior two sessions that I had the honor to moderate, that in my opinion, succinctly, there are perhaps three battles, three tugs of war going on. One around renewables versus fossil fuels, another one versus about centralized generation versus distributed generation, and then another one around waste versus conservation and efficiency. So three interesting, external forces into utilities, vendors, society at large. So what are your thoughts about these battles, confrontations, challenges? What are your thoughts? Renewable versus fossil fuels, centralized generation versus distributed generation, waste versus conservation and efficiency.
Thank you. There's an old saying that your strengths become your weaknesses. Mm-hmm. That's true, continues to be true here. When we look at fast forward from 120 years ago, Edison and Tesla. Edison's dream was local microgrids, mostly DC, but it was impractical. Too many wires running around, not economical. Tesla's was centralized dispatch, large amounts brought through very efficient, 97% efficient high voltage transmission. Now we can do both. So it's not, if we do it right, if we rise above the storm and actually look at how harmoniously we can integrate that. It boils down, I'm not going to pull a Ross Perot, but I have a graphic for it. It's based on really centralization, decentralization, and then incremental change and radical change. And there's a third axis, local nearby sources of fuels versus global. And that gets into energy security, supply chain policy, politics. So decarbonization, there are many drivers for that. But in the interest of time, let me say that we can do a very harmonious change in this area and augment local distribution systems with local microgrids that would make them more efficient, more reliable, more reliant on local energy while enhancing the backbone and integrating sources of electricity and energy that are far away, including wind, by the way. If we increase the North American power grid by 40%, by about by 42,000 miles, by 9%, 42% of electricity in North America can come from wind, because wind is in locations away from population centers, or solar, whether it's distributed or local. We can electrify transportation. We can get away from a lot of fossil fuels. But it's a big ship. It's not necessarily a confrontation. We can move it, but it needs policy support. It needs partnership beyond what we have ever had.
Bob?
So just on renewables versus fossil fuels, I think the answer is decidedly both. We have, thanks to Texas, thanks to Houston, Texas, we now have fracking and natural gas, where natural gas is domestic. It's 50% less carbon. It's the coming thing, and it's the bridge to renewables. Right. And I think people make a mistake by wanting to raise the cost of fossil fuels. I think that's a mistake because it slows economic growth. Right. And so we should, instead of increasing the cost of fossil fuels to deter them somehow, the real answer is to lower the cost of renewables, solar, wind. Texas is really good at wind. Did you know that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm chairman of Texas Reliability Oversight over ERCOT.
So I've driven west of here, and it's nothing but huge wind farms. So both. Let's use natural gas as a bridge, and don't increase its. There's a lot of policy people who want to make it more expensive. I think that's the wrong thing, because economic growth will pay for the transition to renewables.
Right, right. So let's kind of leap forward and try to figure it out. What would be the benefits of a centralized paradigm versus distributed paradigm on an energy internet? So I'm curious, from your point of view, the journey of mainframes, mini computers, personal computers, current architectures, the internet, how we have come. What does an energy internet look like?
Well, I'm a prisoner of the history of the internet that you just summarized, where the progression was from the big mainframes all the way to these babies right here. Sure. Boom, boom, boom. So that whenever I look at energy, I see the same pattern toward more and more distribution. Now the sun is already distributed, so there's a lot of sun, but it's spread around. Right. So that, and if you believe in, as much as I do, in the efficacy of solar, then distributed would be my answer to that question. Right. But you know, both again is the answer, because in computing there are huge, on the internet there are huge server farms out there, and there are watches. So once again, both turns out to be the answer, I guess.
I agree wholeheartedly. I bring you another perspective similar. My background from 82 to 97 was defense, battlefield management, from simple single aircraft, F-15, helicopters for the Army. So you like to have a hierarchical system that's very distributed at the same time. So exactly what Bob said. You need both. You need the ambidexterity of centralized to know full situational awareness of what's going on, but have autonomy locally to execute and to improvise and to adapt in a local basis. So local distribution systems, local substations, homes, with all the equipment, all the instrumentation at a cost and at a carbon gas emission footprint that we can accept, individuals can accept, but coordinated with the needs of consumers at the lowest level. and then having the system around them. At the end of the day, it's like the nested Russian dolls, Matryoshka dolls. The innermost doll is the human being. We are building, whether it's the internet, whether it's this, or whether it's a centralized, now cloud is back, Internet of Things, big computation, big data. It's really, those are the layers we build around them to do what? To provide the services that they require.
Right. I can't help to realize that we're all adopters of technology, aren't we?
You see, there's an old joke. The gentleman who was behind the marketing of a lot of this before he passed away was always like this. And we have all become like him now. We are all like this. Our heads is done and busy with our own things.
If we have time later, I'll tell you how this saved my life.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell us.
No, later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Later.
Hey, but going to nuclear,
Yes.
so this distributed versus centralized issue occurs in the nuclear field.
Right.
Where there's nothing more centralized than a huge, $15 billion nuclear plant. But now I'm seeing startups.
Right.
I'm a startup specialist. I'm seeing them in fission. And those are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. We're talking about we're talking even about distributed nuclear.
Right.
Ultimately, long-term, small modular Gen 4 nuclear combined with solar and with other fuels, other sources. But this is going to be a long-term transition. But ultimately, those are going to be base loading and combined with storage, which has been the Achilles heel for a long time. But also nexus with transportation.
So we will see Mr. Fusion from Back to the Future with the banana peels, a little nuclear reactor.
Well, I mentioned fission, but right after that comes fusion.
Yeah, right.
And there are people working on fusion. My venture capital partners wouldn't let me invest in any fusion companies.
Yet.
There's a thing called regulatory risk that they don't let VCs get involved with.
Okay. So let's switch to networking, and we can always come back to energy to kind of close the loop on these things. But so there is something you all have heard, Metcalfe law. Have you all heard of Metcalfe law? So here's the guy. Okay? He doesn't get any closer than that. So afterwards you can come touch him, say hello, It's changed our lives, hasn't it? So Bob, tell us succinctly among a few friends, how does this come about? Where was the epiphany? How did this, networking thing came about? The push behind it and the thrust of it.
Metcalfe's law, you mean?
Yeah.
In the early 80s, before, are you all interested in this topic?
Yes, sir. We would love to hear Metcalfe law. Would you say?
So in the early 80s, before Ethernet caught on, my company was selling it. And we sold a 3-node starter kit. So you could take 3 IBM PCs and you could plug in our Ethernet cards and hook them with cable. And they could share a printer, share a disk, and exchange email among the 3 machines.
Right.
And people were curious, so they bought it. And then they said, it does everything you said it would do, it just isn't very useful. And I was head of sales and marketing of my company at that time, so I came up with a slide. And by the way, not a PowerPoint slide, because PowerPoint was 1987. This is 1980.
Correct.
And the slide said, well, of course a 3-node network isn't valuable because it hasn't reached critical mass yet. The number of possible connections grows as the square of the number of nodes. Right. And the cost is linear. So at some point, the quadratic passes the linear, and if you can get above that, sky's the limit. Well, that turned out to be true. And the slide was not a lie, although I just made it up.
What was it?
It was not a lie, and this is in all seriousness, because I had the benefit of a time machine. Speaking of Back to the Future, I had been at Xerox PARC, living 10 years in the future.
Right.
And I knew that an internet full of networked personal computers connected by Ethernet was the cat's pajamas. So when I made that slide, I wasn't lying. And by the way, people believed that slide, which is the only reason I'm here. If they hadn't bought anything, I wouldn't be here today. They believed it, and it turned out to be true. That is, as soon as you reach critical mass, then networks become, all forms of networks become quadratically more valuable.
Well, I would say on behalf of the planet that we thank you. We do. I think it's
By the way, I didn't
coolest
call
thing.
it Metcalfe's law.
Others call it. That's
Somebody's-
the whole thing.
Metcalfe.
George Gilder in 1995 called it Metcalfe, but I've had to defend it ever since. There are lots of professors who think it's only n log n,
Yeah.
or some think it's 2 to the n, and we argue about how many
It's n
exponents
squared,
and stuff.
yeah.
But it's,
Right.
but
So-
it's true in energy. It's true in energy. Networking energetic things has the same effect, which is the more of them you can interconnect.
Also, if you could put on top of it directional control, that in power systems we are subject, as you know, Kirchhoff voltage law, Kirchhoff current law, that electrons flow on the path of least resistance. But if you can make it more controllable and put security built in,
Right.
security as you get interconnected, an ability to control the network with the architecture we talked about, hierarchical but distributed at the bottom layer, you can do wonders.
Yeah,
Exactly subject to Metcalfe.
We're going to get there. So before we jump to security,
I want to add 2 more factors.
go ahead.
Please.
So I would add 2 things. One is learning from the internet. One of the ways that the internet made progress was to desynchronize. The telecom network prior to the internet all ran by a big clock that the bell system ticked.
That's right.
And the bell system spent a lot of time being synchronized. Does that sound familiar?
Oh,
Yeah.
very much so.
Yeah, well, the electric...
Frequency at 60 hertz.
There's a whole
synchrophase.
industry called frequency, what's it called? Frequency regulation or
Yeah.
something. So we've got to get rid of that. That's part of
Control.
distributing it is the
DC.
dependence on a centralized... In fact, at dinner night before last, you remember 60 hertz, 50 hertz?
That's right.
And that's not only hertz, that's synchronized hertz.
that's
That is,
right.
we spend all this effort getting in phase. I guess that's so the clocks will all tell the right time.
Yes.
Except all the clocks are digital now, so they don't use the AC to go around. But the other thing, which I think is probably even more important, once again coming from the internet lesson, is storage. The internet is a story of storage. The telecom network prior to the internet had little or no storage because the voice communication had to get through in 100 milliseconds or it was unusable. But the internet was adding storage, and now there's even storage here. So we need energy storage
Right.
to mitigate the randomness of supply and demand.
Right.
Andres and Bob, not to go too much on that tangent, but Bob, along those lines, synchrophasers, phasor measurement units are stepped to actually measure 50, 60 times a second. Since we don't want to wait 2 seconds or 4 seconds electron. So it's a step in that direction to improve the control of the clock system. But moving in the vision that you have, power electronics, making everything loads, generation devices look the same to the network. Therefore, time, dynamics are not as important. I know it's a crazy idea, so please don't think Massoud has gone crazy. He has forgotten his electrical engineering. But it's possible and it's going to happen. The question is when.
Right.
DC is the answer.
Yeah, that's what it does.
So real quick, for you to answer and for you to add on, in the computing world, we take this thing for granted that you log in, your phone, your email, your computer, and the internet knows where you are. There's a MAC address, there's a sync registration, there's identity, IPv4, IPv6, so on and so on. But why, Massoud, don't we have the same in the grid? Why, when I come home with a new 72-inch TV from Best Buy and I plug it in, the operator at Austin Energy doesn't know that I just plugged in a TV or a solar panel or electric storage? Why don't they know that?
Excellent question. That automation, that everything is like Lego pieces, that as you plug them, they say, hey, I'm such and such. The handshake validates in the order of microseconds, milliseconds, knows who they are, and trusted with security within the device, within the communication, authentication, and so on. We have been pushing for it for 18 years, even longer than that. Utility Communication Architecture, UCA, that we created in my old job at Zpryme, tries to do that, has the same 7 layers communication network within the internet. Exactly. But what it has also 3 places you can put security measures within those, and you can actually self-identify, self-regulate, and interconnect without somebody manually having to log you in. Bruce Wallenberg and I wrote an article in 2005 toward the smart grid that actually talks about half a page or 1 page exactly on that. A lot of researchers are doing that. And power electronics actually to connect that connectivity with security built in are part of that trust that's moving forward. There are several at the US Department of Energy funded work does that. My old work at Zpryme before moving to Minnesota, we funded also about 23, 24 professors just in that area into an automated self-healing, self-regulating as part of smart grid. 108 professors were funded back in 98 to 2002. That was a cluster of about 1/5 of the team.
Yeah. I think it's a missing thing, right?
Well, it touches on a pet peeve. I have many pet peeves actually, but when my internet goes down, so when we do fix energy, you shouldn't have this feature.
Right.
When my internet goes down, I know it before Time Warner does.
Right.
I have to call Time Warner and say, my internet is broken. They could know. How come they don't know? How come they don't? Why don't they call me and tell me my internet is broken? So when we finish networking energy with the internet, I believe, we need to fix that problem. So that.
At the risk of endorsing a genius former undergraduate classmate of mine from University of Massachusetts, Lida Nobacht, she has a company in the Bay Area called ViaClicks. It's a box that was way ahead of its time, that it does exactly that. The boxes in the cable companies are way outdated. And she has this called ViaClicks. I don't endorse any companies, but really when I see brilliant people who have done things that are way ahead of the time, and the time has come, that's one of them. Does exactly that.
ViaClicks.
ViaClicks.
Thank you.
ViaClicks.
But you're not endorsing this company.
No, I'm not a stakeholder. I
You
never
think it's
invest.
really great, but you're
No,
not
but
endorsing
it was my undergraduate classmate, 9 courses. I would get 94, 95. I would cry. I would look over. She had 100 in the test.
So let's fantasize for a moment. 10 years from now, energy internet journey. What does 10 years from now should look like, Bob?
Well, the energy network and the internet are converging, so it'll be converged.
Right.
And we're going to move on to another topic, security, which is broken on the internet.
Right.
But we're going to solve that.
Okay.
And we're not going to solve it by building a separate energy network that's more secure.
Right.
No. We're going to converge the two and fix the internet and make sure it's secure.
Got it.
You see, there is a temptation to say, well, the internet's not secure, so we have to build our own one over here. That is not the correct answer. The correct answer is fix the internet and then continue the convergence.
So the mission criticality of energy delivery and security will force the need to fix the internet.
The whole Internet of Things, for which you could say energy is a thing.
Yeah.
So the whole Internet of Things requires increased security. So we're going to have to solve, to a much greater degree, we're going to have to solve security on the internet. Don't build a separate energy network.
I love that.
Well said. We actually assessed that post 9/11 when I led all the security R&D for our North American utilities at Zpryme, and that was exactly the answer. And we had a lot of pushback in 98, even now, 18 years later. Smart grid means more digitization. And the assumption is with more digitization, you're increasing the cybersecurity risk.
Right.
Not if you do what Bob said. Not if you build the devices with security built in as a design criteria. Chips. Remember Ralph Nader talking about faulty nuts and bolts? Where are our chips coming from? What do we know? How do we trust? Other than if you don't buy it from a trusted foundry, how do you know malware, black energy, other things are not installed on it already? Intellectual property theft is the biggest transfer of wealth in our history. So that's one part, chips, protocols, communication. So we can use smart grid with security built in judiciously at the layers we talked about to augment, to improve internet rather than throwing internet out. So I see it's hard to predict, but Wired magazine summarized our work in '99, July of 1999 or 2001 actually, just before 9/11, that every node in the network of the future will be smart, will be price smart, will be eco-sensitive, will be adaptive, and will be humming with everything else. It's the network of networks. It's not just power, it's not just the internet, it's the nexus also with transportation, with our lives, that nested Russian does that I talked about, to enable humanity in a way that each individual also has the privacy, has the security, has the dignity, whether you're in a village, in 300 million people in Africa that are within 1 mile of electric lines, and they are not connected to electricity, but they have telephones, and they get health information on the telephones. To clean water, we are not talking much about water, but water, electricity, transportation, and telecom, convergence of all of that. For what? Not for us geeks, to provide the quality of life for this century.
Sure, sure. I love it. So again, you're conferring to me something that we had talked about earlier, that internet protocols and current journey of evolution of security can manage these mission critical networks.
Absolutely. We have done it for many years. For what you brought up is exactly right. Mission critical infrastructure. You look at the most essential critical infrastructure our lives, our civilization depends on. Electricity, power, telecom, what else? Networks of commerce on top of that, financial systems, that's it. But long term, you add ecology, you add environment, you add clean water, all of those on top of that. But the most essential, if you step back and you think what you need to run everything we run our lives on, that's it, electricity and telecom.
Yeah.
So I'm making a simpler argument,
Okay.
which is don't build a separate energy network.
Absolutely.
Because if we can't make the internet secure, we can't make the energy network secure. So you might as well solve the problem all at once. But I wrote a memo in 1973 on the occasion of the first recorded breach of the internet by 2 high school students in Los Angeles. That was 1973. And here we are. Security is still a huge problem on the internet. So that's a little worrisome. Why is that? Can you explain why that
Absolutely. Because internet was never designed as a mission. It was designed to connect us. You wonderful ganja smoking back then folks wanted to create a better world. That's what you did. Also, electric power network did not grow up with a systematic consideration of its evolution. Utilities connected together, PJM connected, so they can help each other during emergencies, pull their resources together. If you step back and you say, what do we do today with the legacy? We cannot recreate it. With the legacy system, but look at the physics of the problem, are the divisions we have currently based on ownership, based on regulation, based on state boundaries, is that the most optimum model or the most optimum with the measures for reliability, security, system efficiency, and environment are the most efficient one? No. But if you put physics, you put security, you put resilience, and then you can judiciously decide where you augment with what. Where do you put what kind of devices from a systems view on a local level, but you need that comprehensive North American vision in order to do the local one.
Right.
However, there are many, I'm not going to get into the details of it, but as you know, there are many barriers, but we can and we must overcome those barriers. Because coping in the way we have done ultimately is a defeatist strategy. You cannot just cope with a system that was built without such considerations, whether it's the communication network, whether it's the power system. We can modernize and augment this system in a way that we step out, get a panoramic bird's eye view, and judiciously know what to do. And base it on data, base it on evidence, not based on ego, not based on who has the loudest voice, but based on what can actually make a difference.
So the interesting thing about that, there would be a significant number of folks globally, for sure in the U.S. There's a lot of fellow
Brethren and
citizens
sisters,
of mine that will say, well, this whole security, fixing all this, really brings the dilemma of privacy versus Big Brother thing, right?
Transparency
and,
versus
and the whole convenience and affordability. This sounds expensive. This sounds intrusive. So what is the path? What should be the logical way of evolution here on trusting in embracing technology to make this bigger platform for a better life?
So several thoughts there. One of them is, I think the internet, the people, whoever they are in charge of the internet, have gotten the message that security is important.
Right.
So we're on the case. And you're right, in 1973 we weren't on the case because we were all grad students and we assumed everybody was honest and nobody would want to hurt anybody.
Progressive, smart.
And we hadn't met any bad people by then, but then we got our degrees, graduated, and there they were waiting for us.
Yeah.
The bad guys.
The bad actors.
Another thought is I went to work for Citibank in 1975 to work on the first cash dispensers.
Wow.
And the engineers on that project, we were all going for 100% perfect, because we were dispensing cash.
Yeah. Can't make a mistake.
Imagine how disenchanted I was one day when I walked into my boss's office and there was the business model of our bank, and there was a line item, credit card, cash dispenser losses, 3% of revenue. And I'm striving for perfection. The business had budgeted that we wouldn't be perfect already. So I think, but that was a valuable mindset. That is, security is always going to be a problem.
Right.
Always to some degree, and the fact that we can't get it perfectly should not deter us from moving forward.
Yeah. So I'm curious, I'm sure the audience is curious too, but I wonder, and maybe we can ask them to vote on, and maybe we'll ask them first. You can see their reaction, and you can tell us your opinion. So there is this little case between Apple and the government about the phone and the data. How many of you side with Apple? Raise your hand. You guys see that?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. What do you all think?
It's
Would you say,
Well,
would you
it's
say,
the- it's
look,
the opposite
would you
number.
repeat the question for the recording? And please, I'm at 54, I'm getting hard of hearing.
He said
Would
how
you
many. He said how many people would support the other one. So
support
The
the
government.
government.
the government side.
Actually, I support both.
But-
And I'm not being politically correct, and I will tell you why.
Okay, well, tell us.
No, sir,
What,
you
what do you think,
first.
Bob?
Apple should say no, which they have. But more importantly, they shouldn't be able to say yes. That is, the technology that they deliver on the iPhone should not be breakable even by Apple. So, so Obama's FBI is hassling my poor company Apple, which I love. I love Apple.
So do I.
He saved my life. Have I mentioned that?
Yes.
And they, so Apple should say no, and it should be the case that they don't have the option of saying yes.
Okay.
This is the new normal, and I think both are correct. Government should develop measures that would protect individual citizens, would get after terrorists, plotters, but I would say in a more proactive way, not spying on American citizens, but we can do better in security that we have done. Having worked with many gifted colleagues, there is so much capability in the areas that you never hear about. There is so many brilliant minds working behind the scenes in those areas. So I won't go into that. Apple at the same time should do exactly Bob said. It's industry's responsibility to assure, we should ask for it. Actually in the utility industry and beyond utilities, we should insist in security by design. Is this smart meter secure? Is this watch secure? Is this iPhone, is this BlackBerry, my favorite device, is that secure? So both should do their due diligence to deliver on their mission, on their responsibility, on their core commitment to their citizens and customers. So without that, but partnership between them to raise the bar on security, on privacy, and we need both. We need to increase the security, and we need to sustain and increase our civil liberties and our privacy as individuals. We love America. We are Americans in part because we believe in those values. Civil liberties and security should not be this or that. Can we enhance our security while enhancing, increasing our civil liberties and our individual rights? So both are correct.
Okay. Okay. Now you know where they stand. All right,
We didn't take a very controversial position, except for that
Tell us,
one young man
please.
up there.
Yell out. We need, this is unplugged. We're unplugged. And we're speaking honestly. Tell us what you think.
Okay, let's move to innovation. Somebody's favorite topic in the stage. Professor of innovation at the entire university. So what should the energy industry do to accelerate innovation? What is not happening, Bob, that should be done?
I have two answers. One is Houston, and the other is startups.
Okay.
So I spent some time in New England trying to solve energy.
Mm-hmm.
Then I moved to Texas, and I realized that energy is going to be solved in Houston, Texas, because those folks up there understand scale thermodynamics, and we'll all contribute what we can, but I think it'll actually be solved in Houston, which isn't too far from here.
Right.
And the second thought is startups. That is the pharmacy industry, the telecom industry have all learned to use startups as innovation vehicles, and the energy industry needs to do better at that. That is using the startup ecosystem as a way of accelerating innovation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So there are, you probably don't know this, but maybe you do. So there are two Keiretsus in the energy industry, Nextera Energy and other companies, and Southern Company and National Grid and other companies have actually funded venture capital arm that represents them in the market and invest in this kind of early stage. So there are about 20 utilities that are sort of in the hunt of that.
And in Houston, speaking of Houston, there's a great incubator called Surge,
right,
which is
focus
exactly what I'm talking about, which is the you can have corporate venture capital but not embrace startup innovation fully.
Correct.
I'm pushing for fully.
Got it.
And Surge in Houston would be my best example.
Okay. Do you have any?
I brought you a diagram.
Okay.
We are a victim of our success.
Yes.
So the question is, how do we continue work day to day on what we have to do through lean processes, through best practices, while we bring innovation and disruptive technologies into it with a managed risk. So you need ambidextrous leaders, and it's a well-studied, well-documented, understood area, how you have ambidextrous organizations, ambidextrous leaders, that can take care of nuts and bolts of today. There are many colleagues in the audience who are working on the field, installing stuff, getting things done. That's part of it. And then having the room to innovate. And how do you free up that budget item, 5%, 10% to put into innovation? So that is an area that I think our industry can do better. And we haven't had that discussion.
So real quick on your point, should it be 5%? What is the
Whatever
norm?
the right.
What
right
is the
now,
norm?
Right
Bob,
now,
what is the norm?
I can tell you actually.
It's less. It's much less than that. The norm.
Yeah, I've benchmarked
2 to
that.
3%.
Well, Xerox, for example, Xerox, which in the 70s was a monopoly and funded Xerox PARC, where I was honored to work, that was, I believe, 1.4% of revenue was spent on research.
I benchmarked that actually. On all the industrial sectors of our economy, the top 10 industries put somewhere between 6.5% to 13%, 14% into R&D. A lot of it is capital D, development.
Right.
Electricity sector is combined with gas and sanitation services. It's second from the bottom. Only building materials is lower. We put 0.17 of 1% of net sales into R&D. 0.1, less than 0.2%.
Yeah.
Data from 1995 to 2001 was 0.36. 2002 to 2008, it dropped to 0.17 of 1%.
Got it. So did we find a mic? We did? Is it on? I don't hear it. They're across it. I don't know. I mean,
It's not clear to me that percentage of revenue is the correct metric for investment in R&D.
right.
I don't know what the correct.
Okay.
It's actually it's defining,
In
defining the right
the interest of time, because I want to make sure we get to the bottom and then find out how the watch saved
There's
Bob's
more to
life.
talk of.
Education. It's a hot topic. You guys are professors, superstars on that topic. what is being done globally to fix the challenges of the fact that knowledge are being created faster than humans can acquire new knowledge? The grid, the innovation, the internet, and this thing is running so fast, the whole displacement of people. I mean, I feel like I don't know anything every day that I wake up, that, 100 things got invented and I need to catch up with them and I don't have time. My inbox is full of emails, and I think I'm on the leading edge, but I'm not there. So what is, energy companies are facing this problem in a huge way, right? The baby boomers are retiring. This is all changing the construct. What is being done globally to fix the acceleration pace of education, retraining? What should companies do today? What can energy companies do today?
I don't see the connection with energy. How did you?
Well, the energy industry has the largest challenge around retirement and knowledge departing from the company, and the new generation coming in to catch up with what's happening. So the workforce, that challenge of 40%, 50% of the workforce can retire in the next 5 years. And now we have this phenomenal transformational change.
So progress is being made in two general regimes. One of them, the crazy one, is, it took me 3 years to learn Russian.
3 years.
To some level.
Right.
I read War and Peace in Russian.
Okay.
After 3 years. Pretty soon I'll just be able to plug in a chip and I'll know Russian in 2 minutes. So wouldn't that be great? You could just know everything through implants. And we're heading there because we all have Google already. So Google isn't quite implanted yet, but it is we can know almost anything within a minute or so just by typing the right thing into Google. So there's that. Forget education, just give us the knowledge right away. We don't want to wait and go through this educational process. Right. In the educational field, there's rapid progress. The internet is now doing to education what it did to music and journalism and advertising and everything. It's disrupting it completely. And I can report, even though my university is University of Texas at Austin, is aggressively pursuing online learning as opposed to brick and mortar education, we're still in denial about how dramatic these changes are going to be. Okay. And so people, all of us will now be learning our whole lives instead of just that period between kindergarten and SB degree. We'll now be learning our whole lives, and we'll be learning more, and it'll be free, and it'll be everyone. We're going to solve ignorance through education.
Well, that's exciting.
While we're solving education through implants, which I can't wait to learn Russian again.
Living in Minnesota, which is the biggest intensity of medtech devices, medical devices, I echo Bob. Actually, we didn't compare notes, but I was thinking along the same lines. So I just had 3 quick notes. Power, energy, modern versions of that are sexy. At the University of Minnesota, it's not a required course anymore, but out of about 120 seniors, 116, 117 take it as electives. Because we don't teach it the old-fashioned way.
Take what? Take what?
Power, electricity, electric power system.
In order to graduate.
In order to graduate. This is undergraduates. It's exciting. No longer you go to the basement of an engineering building working on outdated equipment. You have the outdated, but you monitor them on this fancy display with MATLAB, with Simulink, with all kinds of
so
economics.
Students voluntarily,
they're
flocking
to power.
Wow.
But the question is, does the market, do the companies have the capacity to absorb these brilliant kids? Number one. Right. So that's one trend. Second one, exactly what Bob said. You need credentialing, Bachelor of Science, Master of Science, Doctorate, MBA, Master of Science in Management, whatever it is. But you need fast access to information you need right there, and that's where we are going. So imagine a combination of Bloomberg, Google, with nonlinear differential equation, optimal control, all grouped together, fast solvers that you put in data, or you say, what data do I need? Boom, it says here it is, here is projecting. Almost like a game of chess, that you define the parameters, or you don't know, you say, what if? Not just for us, but for policymakers. That's coming, and that's some of the things we're working on. The third is liberalization, opening this up to whoever needs at the level of detail they need, but really adaptive and customized to their needs. That dashboard is the direction we are moving in.
Okay. So tell us siding with the government point of view. 30 seconds, please.
I have a 20-minute presentation. No, but Andres, I think the conversation's moved on. I mean, I'm happy to, I guess, very briefly, I think we all, as Americans, should observe the orders that are issued by neutral judges. At the time of the Snowden revelations, the great question was whether the mass accumulation, the mass aggregation of information about Americans was consistent with the Fourth Amendment. And one of the points that was made at the time was that there was no independent judicial authority that was making decisions about the accumulation, the seizure, et cetera, of information. In this case, we had a magistrate who made a decision about whether or not a third party, in this case Apple, would be required to assist in finding out information in connection with a crime. So we had everything there. There was the process contemplated by the Constitution and contemplated by our statutes of a neutral magistrate, once again, making the decision on obtaining that information. So that's my Reader's Digest version.
I appreciate it. Let's take the conversation forward. We don't have time to follow the topic, but thank you, Carter. Again, we're showing that we're an open forum here. We don't have time. We're eating into Chris Euster's time, who's head of generation. So real quick, sustainability. This is an important topic. Again, there is an unspoken race towards achieving sustainability of the key resources such as water, energy, food, and so on. We've talked about it. And then, at risk, which those resources are challenged and at risk because of the growth of population, et cetera. Can we achieve sustainability from your point of view in our lifetime? Is this a panacea, unicorn thought, or can we achieve sustainability?
That's a really hard question. My gut says we can, and we are. We're innovating rapidly. We're lowering the cost of solar. Startups are showing up at our university to make pure water, and so I think we're on the right track to solving what you call sustainability. Mm-hmm. Yes, I think so. Mm-hmm. That's a hard question. Yeah.
I've assessed it some other time we talk about it. It's an evolutionary journey, and there are four areas or four eigenvectors, if you will, for us geeks. I call them variation, selection, retention, and struggle. We have seen the struggle part a lot. Solantro, others that haven't been able to grow it and have gone bankrupt. But those four criteria, variation, selection, retention, and struggle, are the things that we can assess. And I have assessed Intel, Koshla Ventures, all of various venture capital, the ones who have succeeded, the ones who have not succeeded, and the role of government, the role of policy. Is a huge part, is the macro environment in which these four trusts are managed. And it's really like the dashboard that I alluded to earlier. You have a dashboard. You're monitoring all these Bloomberg, Google, solvers, etc., with bands of uncertainty around them. And the answer is yes, sustainability can be achieved, but it's an evolutionary process.
Got it. Thank you. Bob, how does the watch save your life?
My son works at Apple. So, that combined with the fact that I knew Steve Jobs when he was around, I buy Apple products. So I bought the watch, for which I could think of no use other than telling time, which is pretty expensive. So I was playing around one day, and there's this thing, here it is here, and you just tap it like this, and it assesses your heart rate. So I'm looking at this, wondering how useful it's going to be, and it came up with the answer, 38. And I'm not Lance Armstrong. So 38 is not the correct answer. So I wait, it's 69 now, which is good. So then I waited an hour and I tapped it again and it said 138.
Wow.
Whoa. So this caused me to call a doctor. Doctor said, you have an arrhythmia. Let's fix it. 2 days later it was fixed and everything's fine.
So the watch was right.
Well, he said that if arrhythmias can eventually lead to your death. That's why I dramatically say it saved my life. But it was just an accidental use of this thing. So the Internet of Things is coming. This is the thing. It's on the internet, and it's already saved my life, and so now I use it a lot. Oh, I'm up to 70. I'm so excited. It's up to 74 now.
You know what it is? It's the quality of life that Russian Nested does, we talked about. The quality, the services, the metrics that you care about. For me, it was sleep apnea. I had no idea, and nobody, I'm alone, I don't have any family, and I had no idea. And not this, but my old Fitbit saved my life. I found out, and guess what? You know, that's really where we are going with technology.
Right.
Customized, whether it's microgrids, whether it's improving our quality of life. And it's nothing new. You look at scientific agriculture, modernized medicine, a lot of innovations that we have enjoyed and we now take for granted were science fiction just 50 years ago.
So that completes the list now of what I consider to be the three big areas of innovation. Energy, education, and healthcare. And all three of them are way bigger than what we did before.
Right.
Music, journalism, advertising are tiny compared to
Right.
energy, education, and healthcare.
Healthcare,
And we're working on it right now, which is why I'm optimistic we're going to achieve what you call sustainability.
Thank you. Give him a hand. It's an honor and a pleasure. I want to do a selfie real quick. It's one of the things that I do on stage. We're going to do a selfie, you know. But we're going to do a selfie real quick here. Two selfies. One over here.
Oh, the lights look really good.
Oh, this is, see, here we are. Let's get a little closer there. There we go.